Now, tonight at the pub table, I have two guests with me. For once, as a writer at this writerly table, I am outnumbered, and I'm very happy about it. So both of my guests are members of the Anselm Society Arts Guild, and both are primarily visual artists. So welcome, Nicole, and welcome, Isaac. And I'm going to introduce you guys, and I'm going to be far too reductive probably in my introductions of each of you, but we'll cover more ground as you tell your own stories and we chat. So we have Nicole Beck. She is a painter working primarily in oils and primarily in portraiture. Her group and solo exhibits have been seen in Mississippi, Missouri, and Colorado. And her most recent award was from Artist Magazine's Artists to Watch issue in 2025, where she won first place in the portrait and figure category for her oil on panel entitled Pietà. Isaac Hands is a photographer focusing primarily on road trip photography, which Christina and I got to talk with him about on this very podcast last year. His solo and group exhibits have been seen in California, Indiana, and Colorado, and he earned his MFA in visual arts from Azusa Pacific in 2024. All right. So my first question. So for writers, it's assumed that we are storytellers. That's sort of almost, it's treated like those two things are synonyms, right? Because it's all words, plot, character, beginning, middle, end, story arc, all that thing. So I am wondering if you, each of you as visual artists, view yourselves as storytellers. So let's start with Nicole. What would you say about that?
Yeah, I definitely think visual artists are, though I think depending on who you ask, they might see that in different ways or communicate it in different ways, because it is a little bit different or a lot different than with words. There's a French philosopher I was reading recently who talks about how like words have to do with truth and visuals have to do with reality. And those are related, but they're also really different and how they kind of interact together. So I think there is storytelling involved in visual art, my own art specifically, but I think the clarity or the direction of the story can be a lot less precise. I can't maybe lead my reader quite as closely as a writer can, but I think that's also what makes it interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. What about you, Isaac?
Yeah, with the writers, it's kind of an assumption from the reader, like this person has something to say, whether it's a story or an article or, persuasive essay, like something they're trying to make a point with the writing. And the visual arts don't have that assumption. There's, because of postmodernism, there's all these different interpretations of what visual art can be. A lot of people walk up to a painting and it's like, it doesn't speak to me, or this, I put myself in the story. And there is some art that's the point of it. And then there's other art that's not the point of it. And I don't think that because of how we consume art, like in the gallery or in a museum, it's not something that we're taught to enter into as easily as we are taught to read a book.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like when I look at a painting, I feel like when people in general kind of look at a painting, you're looking at it more from your own perspective right away, almost, instead of asking, what is the painter trying to tell me? Unless it's like, I don't know, we were just recording podcasts, Christina and Matt and I, about King Arthur. And obviously, if the painting is a scene from, L'Amour d'Arthur, it's going to tell a story. But when it's an original thought from the painter, like you said, I don't think we're trained as viewers of the art to ask ourselves what the artist is saying.
I think similarly to like with written work, where you're trained pretty early to look at genre and kind of how that helps you interpret written work. I feel like that's something people have next to no training on a lot of times with visual art. So, because you mentioned the King Arthur stuff, and that's very clearly, it is within the visual artistic realm, but it's clearly illustration. Not all visual art is illustration. Not all visual art is decoration, which some of it is, and everything in between. And so I feel like genre kind of comes into visual art a lot more than people expect when they're first learning about it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Because I think I tend to just file it into like realistic, impressionistic, abstract. And it didn't occur to me like, oh yeah, illustrative versus narrative or decorative, like you said. I might have to do a part 2 of this with my abstract artist friend, Becca Day. I'll have to invite her. So there's so many ways. Okay, that's why we have a whole podcast. I have so many questions. They're like jammed up in my head. So when you go to a painting for you, Nicole, or a photograph for you, Isaac, are you hoping that the viewer will see what you've intended? Because like me as a writer, when I'm writing something, I'm like, I hope that's really clear. I hope they're getting what I'm laying down, you know? Because if they don't, particularly in a long piece of work, if I'm not clear and they're not following me, then where are we going to go with this? So how tightly are you holding on to your hope that that the story that you're trying to tell is received?
I think that's a hard question for a visual artist, especially for all artist writers work differently. I don't necessarily go out with an intention of a story or a narrative when I pick up my camera. So I don't walk outside and say like, oh, I'm going to go take a photo of this fence because I want to say I'm trying to be guarded. I don't know. But
Like the
the way
Robert
that I
Frost
work,
poem about
yeah.
fences. Yeah.
Something that a professor once told me as I was like trying to wrestle through like what I was trying to say, he is like, as a visual artist, especially as a photographer, you process with your camera, you think with your camera. So go out and think, and then you can figure it out later. And so I go out and I
Right.
shoot, and I have, the project we talked about, Ordinary Times in America last year. I shot, I think, 900 photos, which doesn't sound like a lot in the digital world, but everything I shoot is on film. So that's,
Ooh, that's a lot.
900 different places that I went, and I would only shoot one frame, per place. And so I don't use all of that. I pare it down and form a narrative from that. Like I almost think of it as like the clay for the sculpture. I have to create all
Yeah.
this stuff to work with, and then I can figure out how I'm going to mold it from there. And so I go
That's
out,
cool.
take
Sorry.
photos, and I say like, okay, what's the narrative that's emerging from this work? What are the patterns in myself that I'm constantly drawn towards this? Something in that project was like every photo that I took of someone who wasn't a friend, like they were a stranger, or I just took a snapshot on the street, it like didn't work. So like an important part of the project became, well, I'm photographing people that I stay with, people that I know, people I have like relationship and community with. And maybe there was one or two photos that could have worked that I didn't know. I didn't know the person that well, but I took them out because I was like, okay, that's not going to be part of this narrative of what I'm trying to get across about community and that kind of longing that's fulfilled within community. And so that emerged. I didn't go out, thinking that. I was staying on my friend's couch and I said, hey, the lighting's pretty. You want to get outside and take a photo? And but that's what emerged over time. And so I think now, yes, I do want the viewer to be able to like feel the message that I'm trying to get across.
Mhm.
And it's not, a logical sort of like A to B, B to C, therefore, kind of argument that I'm making, but it's a feeling and a reaction that when people say, this photo makes me feel like I'm home. It reminds me of home. Like that's a big thing in the work that I'm like, yes, like, that was something that I was trying to get.
Mhm.
But again, I don't set out on day one with that intention, which I think a lot of times writing might be a little bit different, where you start from the like, here's the main point, and I will build the story from that. I don't know.
Right.
I'm not a writer in that way,
Right. Yeah, that varies too, obviously, but yeah.
but it's less for me about like initially what do I want to say. It's what am I drawn to? What is going on in the creation act
Okay.
that then becomes a narrative.
Right. I like that the analogy of it being like clay because it's like you're making the clay and then cut it. Yeah. What about you, Nicole?
Yeah, I feel like my answer may be a little more similar to writers than photography is, just like the nature of my process where I have to have most of it planned out on the front end. I think there is a
Mhm.
lot of early planning. But even with that, I feel like there's an ambiguity to some of it. I don't think in words are like my second language, I think, compared to images. So I feel like I have to kind of translate things from images into words to kind of, so it's a little bit tricky. It's not always as simple as like, I'm going to do a painting of this thing so that people understand this
Mm.
specific concept. Sometimes it's kind of fuzzy. It's putting two things together and just seeing how they vibrate together in an interesting way,
Mhm.
like conceptually. And also think, and that this is similar to what some writers do, there's a lot of kind of hidden messages, some of which are intentional, some of which I think you learn later that you put in
Mhm.
your work and didn't even know.
Yep.
Not to compare myself in any way, but like I'm thinking about, C.S. Lewis's work, where Michael Ward just recently kind of unlocked something that he did, and Andrew Lazo working on Till We Have Faces, kind of figuring out stuff he was doing in those works that he didn't come out and say, no one got it, so I'm going to explain what I was trying to tell you. So
Right.
I think sometimes there's things in there that I don't necessarily care strongly about people getting, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't be in there, if that makes sense.
That
Sometimes
does,
it can
yeah.
just be for me, or sometimes it can be for a very specific interpretation for a specific person later. And sometimes I don't even know what I'm putting into it. And then later someone looks at a painting, asks like, oh, is this what you meant? And I'm like, technically no, but also maybe. So that's a really nice, fun surprise that I get kind of from reception. The work doesn't feel completed till I get response back
Well,
from an
that's interesting.
audience.
Yeah.
And that's something one reason I really love like openings and gallery receptions and things
Mhm.
is it's just it's very rewarding kind of payoff for all the work.
Yeah. Do you feel the same way, Isaac? You're nodding about that. As far as what she said about it doesn't feel complete until it's seen and reacted to.
Yeah. And I think that even with photo work and photo galleries, it can be even different where it's kind of ongoing. Sometimes there's a really famous photographer, Wolfgang Tillmans, and his gallery shows, he'll have like a body of work. But if he does a different show around the country, he'll display it in a different way. He'll print it in different sizes. He'll rearrange the gallery in a different way, and it creates a new meaning. And I think especially with photos, that's a fun thing to play with. I've done two main shows of Ordinary Times in America. One was my thesis show that was in a real gallery. But then I also did, before I left, as I was like figuring out like what works, what doesn't, I did a show in my home, and I
Mhm.
invited a bunch of friends over and just hung up the work on the walls of my house and got feedback, because you want to know what's working and what's not working. And for a photographer especially, I think you can stare so much at the computer screen that until you see it on the wall and see other people's reaction to it, you don't know exactly if it works, if it doesn't, how it interacts. I felt like when I was planning the show out, I felt sometimes like a serial killer. My roommates will like, for probably a year, the living room was just covered in photos, and it's like, okay, what do these two do together? And they would sit there,
Mhm.
for a week or two, and I'd be like, nope. And there got to be pairings of like, okay, these three, they really work together. They'll be on the same wall, they'll be near each other in the gallery. These two, they do not work together. We're gonna move it around. But I did that for like a year. They were always just like moving around, and it became like a fun thing that when people would come over, they would see the work, and I'd get their interpretation and their reaction, and they say like, what about these two? I'm drawn to really these two. I think getting these other people to interact with it was a really fun part of the process.
That's really interesting because, like as artists, it's such a weird combination of lonely work, but then the community part is so important. And yeah, it's really, you have to be kind of two different kind of people based on which part of the process you're in at any given time. I was going to ask, I think might be a good time to ask it because you're talking about it in regard to like a collection. How does it differ if you're working on a piece that is a standalone piece versus setting it up as like a collection for a book or a gallery show? There's still a story within each single image, but how does that feel different? Do you have a preference for one or the other?
I prefer a collection. Sorry, Nicole.
Okay.
To me, it is, to make another analogy, a single image is like a line in a poem,
Okay.
where I can craft this really well. It can be beautiful by itself. You can take it out of context and it's still beautiful, but it makes more sense in the whole. And that's how I like to work. There's maybe been a few times in my life where I've had a photo that is like a standalone thing, but a lot of it is a body of work. And so I view like my two main bodies of work as like one piece. So Ordinary Times in America, if it was ever to become a book, will probably have like 120 images in it, but I view that as one work, one message.
Yeah, I feel like it's similar for me. I've actually been kind of deep in the process of figuring out individual pieces versus show mindset, and just recently kind of realized how much I prefer and benefit from working from like a larger show mindset, even though just kind of the nature of painting and display, like after an initial show, I might enter smaller shows and then one piece might go off to be in a group show somewhere else, like
Hmm.
in Missouri or something like that. So they need to stand on their own. They can't be completely unintelligible, removed from the collection. But especially for me with the creation process, it's a lot easier for me to think of ideas when I'm in the constraints of a bigger idea. It's really
Okay.
strange for me to think I could paint anything in the whole world for one piece. Like, what should I do? Whereas oftentimes I'll have one idea for a piece initially, and then it kind of floats around in space. And then once I can construct a larger show idea around it, then you start having these other ideas popping in that talk to it.
Hmm.
And so I feel like getting a larger body of work, coming up with like 15 individual pieces completely out of the ether seems impossible.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's around one theme or one idea, that's pretty easy for me to like follow threads and be interested in something and wonder why I'm interested in it and then kind of follow the spider web out.
Mhm.
And also, too, it's a lot of fun with visual imagery to have repeating motifs and things like that. They just, you can say a lot more once you start being able to like widen your vocabulary a bit.
Yeah. I was thinking about it sort of like recently I've realized that we've lost the art of listening to albums as an album, like song 1 through song 12 or what 21 if you're Noah Khan or whatever. But and so it's too easy to just put it on shuffle and, whatever. Even within an album, I would realize I would have it on shuffle, even if I was just listening to the album. And then I'm like, no, 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 I got to take it off shuffle because this artist put these songs in order intentionally. And so I was thinking about that in the context of your shows. And especially like when you were just talking about it, Isaac is actually like moving them around and figuring out. And would you call that like, is that kind of part of the storytelling? Is that how you decide how things go? Would you phrase it that way? Like how, because here's what I'm thinking. Like when I walk into a gallery, I'm like, do I view them in order? Like, I don't know if I don't know if I do. Like when I just kind of go to where I'm drawn. Like, I don't know. This is the control freak in me that's having a hard time knowing how you put a gallery show together and just let people look at it. I don't know. There was a question in there somewhere.
This might be different than Isaac because I think maybe he has a little more intention, which pieces go next to each other. But at least for me, it doesn't feel very like linear. I feel like
Okay.
with writing and things like that, and like poetry, obviously there's a natural linearness to it. You can't read a
Hmm.
poem in like every line. You can't mix the lines up necessarily
That's
and have it make sense.
true.
And so I think there's maybe some thought sometimes into which pieces go next to each other. Usually for me, it's less storytelling and more aesthetic. So, like if I have, a composition that's cramped on one border, the piece next to it, I don't want it cramped on the opposite. I don't want
Oh, okay.
weight together. So it's more aesthetic than it is storytelling, I guess.
Okay.
But sometimes you get little surprises too. I think certain themes or motifs will be in greater contrast next to other themes and motifs, but it tends to be more intuitive, not as thought out, I think, at least for me.
Okay. I see you
I
nodding,
agree.
Isaac.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hanging the show was so fun, but also just kind of a nightmare of like
Yeah.
trying to get everything up on the wall. And I brought too much work for the space. And so I had to like cut things out
Oh,
because kind of like what Nicole was saying is you want people to walk into this, it's almost like being an interior designer. You want people to walk into this space and feel welcome. Like if you have too much art on the walls, they're going to feel claustrophobic. And maybe that's the intention you want for the work. But if it's not, then okay, then you have to leave a lot of white space. You have to leave a lot of, empty walls. You have to give the work room to breathe, which like sounds
hmm.
strange to say to a non-artist, but if things are too cramped, it's gonna like tighten the feeling of the viewer. And so there was
Hmm.
like intention on certain pairings and walls where like, okay, these two photos are really close to each other. That's kind of signaling to you that I want these two things to be viewed together because they're
Hmm.
like, oh, these frames are almost touching. I bet you they're in conversation with each other. But then other times, there wasn't, and things happened where it was like, oh, I really like how, these two things are on opposite walls, kind of almost talking across the gallery to each other.
That's so cool.
But there can't be, I mean, there can. It depends on how the artist sets it up. But a lot of times people don't walk into a gallery and say like, okay, I start here and I walk around and, it's like a storyboard and they go to this one and then they go to this one and they kind of, that one doesn't interest me that much. And I'm going to move on to over here. And so you have to be open to that, I think, and ready for that.
Hmm.
Unless I had a friend who did a show where it was very much like you put arrows on the floor of like, this is the way that you
Wow.
go,
Cool. Okay.
which changed I liked it. It changed the narrative.
Hmm.
because it was very much like a here is a story that I'm telling, and it won't
Mhm.
make sense. But for my work, I like the kind of randomness of it, where you never know what two things are going to be talking to each other.
So basically, Mandy, if you go to an art show and there's not arrows on the floor, you're doing it right.
Yeah,
You
Fair
can go
game.
do
wherever
whatever you
you
want.
want.
Yeah,
I'm always worried about
yeah,
doing it wrong.
yeah.
As an artist, it's kind of fun at an opening to have people walk in and just see where they go first. Like people tend to like beeline for something, and it's kind of fun to see what it is that catches people's eye. And it's not the same for everybody. So.
Yeah. I was actually going to ask you about that specifically when you do gallery show. So it sounds like both of you really enjoy the gallery shows and watching people interact. So Nicole, I know your paintings aren't self-portraits, but your face is in some of your painting. How do you define that? It's not a self-portrait.
Yeah.
It's just
So it's not self-portraits, which this is something actually like moving forward in my work I've learned from and am moving away from, because
okay.
as much as I am oftentimes modeling simply because it's the most convenient to get yourself scheduled than it is to find somebody. And I know kind of what I'm thinking. I've kind of learned over time that it's for people who know me, especially, or at an opening where I'm there, it's distracting. People
That's what
assume I'm
yeah.
saying something personal. And so that's just something I think learning as an artist, you're saying something sometimes you didn't mean to, and you just kind of have to course correct. So not to say I won't use myself again, but I think if I do, it'll be for a specific reason that
Mm.
I'm injecting myself into it. So again, that's just kind of a learning curve, which the last opening I had, I was like, oh gosh, like the number one question I'm getting is like, is that you? And I'm like,
Right.
I want to talk about the painting. So yeah.
Well, that's partly why I was going to ask, because I was
Yeah.
like, if I were a painter, I would kind of like just sit there and be anonymous
Yeah.
and but you haven't been
Mhm.
able to as much because your painting is too good, so we know it's your face. But
Rookie
so
mistake.
you're not a rookie at all. Isaac, do you like to just stand there and pretend to just be a viewer and see what they say, eavesdrop?
I like to be able to listen to what people say. I feel like I had the opposite problem of Nicole, where I was taking photos of everything else and the work of this last show was about my journey on a road trip, where my advisor was like, "You're not in the work. Where you need at least one photo of you on the wall. If this is a part of the narrative is about your journey, you have to be present." And so
So
I
were
forced
you?
myself to
Did
take a
you
few.
have any of you?
Hmm. I had
Oh, you
one,
did. Okay.
yeah, that I had taken of myself. Just in like I was taking a photo of it was myself in a mirror in a hotel room that I was staying at on the trip.
I remember. Okay. Yes, I've seen
Not very like, Instagram like here I am sort of
Yeah.
photo, but
that.
putting
No.
myself in the work.
Right.
I do like to listen to what people have to say. I'm very interested just in what Nicole said, what people are drawn to. There were times where, they would come up and they would say, "Oh, I really like this photo." And I do love all my photos, but I'm like, that's the one. Like out of all of them, that's the one that you're like, "Oh, this like I think it's important to the work, the project, but it's not like, one of the anchors that's like, I had
Mm.
my 5 to 10 that's like these have to be in it because these are my favorites. These are the ones that like really hit the point home, and it'd be like this other thing, and they're like, "I love this," and I'm like, "Why?" Okay, cool. I mean, I do too, but like, why do you like it?
Did they answer
And
you?
I
Did
think
you
that
get
yeah, and normally it's some self like the image meant something to them in their upbringing, their childhood.
mm.
One of them, like the one I'm thinking of right now, was like a photo of my grandpa's workbench that I love. It
Okay.
reminds me of my grandpa. I think it's important. I have it near, but like someone came up and was like, this just brings me right back to my grandpa. Like this is my dad's, exactly like what he had, sort of thing. Where like, if you're looking
Yeah.
at all the photos, I'm not going to be like, that's the one that stands out. I'm going to point
Right.
to a few other portraits or a few like ones with really amazing lighting or, like something really interesting going on. Not just like this simple workbench, but for, someone that was, no, I get it. This is great.
Well, and that's because it resonated with his story. So we get right back to like, what story are you telling? And that stuck out to him because it was part of his. Huh.
It reminds me, I have one painting that wasn't for my show, my solo show. It was for a group show last year that was on the 7 Deadly Sins.
I was going to ask
And
you about that.
well,
Yeah.
it's so funny because I did this painting, which is kind of like Dust Bowl aesthetic, a little like kind of retro. And it's got weird surrealist stuff. There's a big bear. I mean, there's all kinds of weird stuff. And I had this older lady come up and be like, she just gasped and she was like, I remember living in that time. Like that looks like I remember being like 20 and like feeling that. And I was like, fair, okay, it's kind of weird, but also cool that she like connected with the aesthetic, I guess, of kind of like Midwest, like
Yeah.
prairie vibe. So it's always funny what people see and what they like. And I wouldn't say I thought she was my target audience with that piece, but there you go.
Yeah, that's an edgy
Mhm.
piece. It
Yeah,
was for
yeah,
sloth, and so
yeah,
what's it called? Smoke break? Is that
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna ask how that is that the only piece that you've done to be part of that you did with a assignment, I don't know, I guess, but it wasn't your like all you had to tell a part of a story, but you were only responsible for one piece of it. Is that the only time
Yeah,
you've done something
I
like
think it
that?
was, at least in the near like, the recent times. I
Right.
had a few similar things, like, way back when I was in school, kind of assignment-based stuff,
Right.
but that was just a very clear, like, an invitational to participate in a themed show,
Hmm.
which was so fun. I would do that every year.
I was
It's
gonna
a lot of
ask.
fun to
Okay.
work with other artists and collaborate. That show specifically was fun because we were paired with other artists, photographers with painters to work on
Hmm.
stuff together, and I love that dynamic. And I also love being given themes and guardrails. It really helps my,
Yeah.
like, ideas to kick in.
Yeah. Well, if they do it again, we got to have Isaac be one of the
No,
photographers.
Yeah.
he's on
Yeah.
the short list. That gallery owner's talking about another
Yeah.
one, and I pitched
Cool.
Isaac
Great.
already, so
That's
yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I
So what
totally
if,
relate to that
yeah,
too. Oh, sorry. Of
no, that's
in
what I was going to
school,
ask.
I was so good at this week we're doing whatever it was, and I could like walk right up to the line and I could like kind of break the rule a little bit and be creative and like think outside the box and make
Hmm.
it work. And then you leave school and they're like, now make whatever you want. And it's like, what do you mean make
No.
whatever I want? I have nothing to
My
Right.
say.
gosh. It's hard.
Well,
But yeah, I love
that's what led to your conversation with your professor, right? About
yeah.
you don't think about what you're doing yet. Just go take the
Yeah.
shots.
I had gotten
Yeah.
so like wrapped up in like, what do I want to say? What do I want to? Because my undergrad like final project was road trip based, and I drove to each of the houses that I grew up in. I moved around a decent amount as a kid, and I took a photo of each house. I loved the project, but every photo was accounted for before I even got in the car. I knew what I was going to take a photo of, and so when I left school and was kind of like, I don't know what to take a photo of, I just kind of got stuck and like didn't take photos for a while. And then I would
Hmm.
try something, be like, oh, I have this like concept and I'm gonna go, and I'd go and shoot and it wouldn't work. And I'd be like, oh, didn't work. And then back to square one and I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And this other way of working of just shoot, and then edit later
Hmm.
opened up a whole new thing for me.
Yeah, that mirrors in a lot of ways kind of my experience. I remember when I left school, I just got an art minor, so pretty small amount of classes, but had a couple really good professors. And I remember one of them saying, like, the hardest part of your artistic journey is going to be leaving school, and all of a sudden, no one cares. No one cares if you ever paint again. No one cares if you like. And
Mm.
that's not fully true. Like, you can break that down, but there's this thing where, like, you could never paint again and no one's going to be harassing you about it. No one's going to be giving you bad grade. There's no pressure. You have to internally motivate for the first time. And it's a really hard adjustment. And I think too with school and kind of that dynamic of maybe having a big show that you had a big theme for, kind of like Isaac was saying, you can get wrapped up in this idea of like upping your game and, oh, what do I want to say? Which
Mhm.
I'm sure there are some visual artists who that works for. Maybe they have one thing they're passionate about or one message that they're really, but for me, I can't do that. I have to lead with aesthetics. I have to just think, what am I interested in? What do I like to look at? What motifs like make me curious? And then
Mhm.
kind of find the meaning as I go. But I can't come in meaning heavy on the front end or I just get paralyzed.
That's interesting. So your journey is similar then.
Yeah.
Because like you had a collection that's like you had several that are birds,
Mhm.
right? But then that was also part of the show. That was all part of the show that you had at I can't remember the name of the gallery.
Bosky.
Yeah, Bosky.
Yeah, very similar.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, I lost my train of thought because
Well, I
I
think
had
going off of that,
yeah, go for it.
I think that's another version of narrative that we don't aren't taught unless you go to art school to really look at and think is to look at the narrative of like this artist's work over the course of their life. You know, where like the birds in this last show for Nicole have more meaning or deeper meaning because like you knew Mandy that she did another show with birds in it, and you're like, okay, this is a reference towards a motif that's like going throughout. Whereas if you just walk up to a painting with no context, there's not a lot of like story to it. The example I like to give is Edward Hopper. You've probably seen his famous painting of
Night
the calf night. I'm gonna forget the name.
Nighthawk?
Nighthawk.
Wait,
Not
Yeah,
mhm.
is that right?
like
Yeah.
that's a
Good job.
very famous painting.
Yes.
But throughout his life, a lot of times there's a man and a woman in a lot of his paintings. And when you read up about his life, you learn that him and his wife were both painters, but she sacrificed her kind of artistic career to be the one to go out and sell his work. And so he was the painter, he became famous, and she was the one that kind of put her life on hold for that. And so one of my favorite paintings of his is less known. It's called, I forget, it's like two clowns or two, I forget, but it's just a man and a woman on stage, very simple painting, kind of dressed in like Shakespearean, like Joker, kind of like the there's two jesters that might be the painting,
Okay.
but it's a man and a woman, and it looks like in the painting that he is kind of like pushing her forward so that she can take her final bow, and like that's the last painting he ever painted, and then he died. And so like this is like if you walk up to that painting in a gallery, it's like cool painting, but you hear the story of his life, and it becomes this like really beautiful piece and ode to his wife, and it creates so much more meaning. And that narrative is all tied up in the painting, but if you don't do more than just look at the painting, you're never going to get that.
Yeah. That's such a challenge, like to have, which I know you were saying, and I agree, even as a writer, I have to have some kind of boundary or it's a wreck, but not an outline. I don't outline, but, but to be constrained like that and to know that I mean, it's like the limits of art are just like in your face. Like you can't escape the fact that this is only going to be as much as it can be, but that has to be enough. And yeah, now I need to look up that painting. Is it two jesters? Did you look it up?
Two comedians. I just looked it up.
Two comedians.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like in that way, like visual art, just like literary art, there's like a surface reading, and all of this can be satisfying and entertaining, whatever. But then you can get deeper and deeper layers. It's like trying to read T.S. Eliot's Wasteland without understanding all of the like hundreds of allusions to other works in it. You can still enjoy it, but by investing to learn and be curious as a viewer, you can pull more and more out of it. And I think, I don't know, I think here's kind of me going into my rant about my pet
Do it.
peeve, but I think expecting the viewer, like you want to be hospitable. You don't want to make it purposefully difficult, but at the same time, you don't want to make it so accessible that it requires no skin in the game or no
Right.
kind of thought. So again, people are well intentioned, but when I'm at a gallery opening and someone walks in and says, "What does the bird mean?" It's like, it's kind of my pet peeve in the sense of like, well, like, what do you think? Like, what have you looked at the whole show? Do you know anything about birds in visual art? Again, it's well intentioned, but I think it's kind of expecting the painter to do something that we don't expect writers to do. Like, we kind of expect illusions and mystery from writers, and I think people want paintings interpreted. And
That's a good point, because we
Yeah.
think we look at it like it's two-dimensional, so it must be understandable in a two-dimensional way.
Yeah, or translate this visual art form into words. And that's not always possible.
But a picture is worth 1,000 words. I did the math. No.
There you go.
Were you going to say something, Isaac?
Yeah, I'm just thinking through, like, I think that there is this weird, kind of like, I go off what Nicole was saying, desire for for you to explain the painting almost as a way to justify it. Like,
Ooh,
because
yeah.
there's like, we've heard all the cliche of you walk through the gallery, look at the 3-year-old and like, that looks like a 3-year-old could do that, or
Yeah.
whatever. So if you can justify why you did something, then it must be valuable. Then it must be worth something.
Mhm.
Because if it's just, random splotches on the canvas, well, like, what does it mean? Because if it means something, then I can like appreciate it or like give it value. But if it's just, whatever, then it's not valuable if I don't understand it.
Right.
And I think as Christians, this is my pet peeve. My soapbox, I'll get out.
It's Pet
Is
Peeve Day.
That's right.
I don't think as Christians we're called to like fully understand everything at all times, especially like when it comes
Amen.
to, the Trinity and beauty and creation and like all these things. Like there's a deep mystery in our faith, and you have to be able to see the great story and see the beauty behind it. And I think there's a trend nowadays, like in art, but then also just in like our faith, that like people want, if you can't give a rational explanation for it, then we're going to toss it
Mhm.
aside. And I think that that's like seeped into paintings a lot. The One of my side jobs, my many side jobs, is working at a gap year program, and I get to teach the students about art at this program, and it's always one of my favorite things to give a lecture and say like, here's all the ways that you can view art, and if you don't understand it, that's okay. Like maybe you're
Yeah.
not supposed to understand it. Maybe you're supposed to ponder, and there's a beauty in that.
Yeah, I feel like if we go straight to the explanation, we interrupt like the resonance. You know what I mean? Like when there's mystery and when you're pondering it, that's when it's like after the bell has rung, that resonance that floats out. Like we need to sit with that.
It kind of reminds me, one of the favorite ways I like to think about it is like watching a magic show and people go up to the magician and, how did you do it? And then the second you tell them, interest is lost, they walk off, zero interest. And like I've kind of tried throughout the years and I've done different things. And the time that I've been like, the bird means this, I see that same look. The sparkle goes out, people walk off, they lose interest. So you're
Mhm.
not doing anyone a favor by
Yeah.
removing that mystery.
Mm-mm.
And again, there's a line between I love discussing it, I love sharing, but that's different than saying, give me the answer,
Right.
because you kind of lose the power with that.
Well, and I think as artists, I feel like we have to approach our work somewhat like that too, because I think some of my earlier writing, I think I was trying to figure it all out, maybe sort of like you, Isaac, with your camera. I was trying to know what I wanted to say, and I wanted to understand why I was going to do it a certain way before I actually did it. And it wasn't until I just sort of said, I don't know why why so and so is narrating this part. I'm just going to do it, And so, and I don't know, that's the whole mystery and like beauty of sub creating in the first place, like being
Hmm.
the creator and the receiver of it. It's just magic. It's magical. It's like
Going
we're
back to
creating liminal spaces and then sitting in them. Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
going back to Nicole's point much earlier, talking about giving yourself a theme and like working within
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I think when you were talking about that, like it reminded me like so much of just how it takes the pressure off. Like my
Hmm.
entire idea doesn't have to rest upon this one piece, or this
Right.
one sentence or whatever. Like I think that it having that helps with the blank canvas effect of like you
Mm,
get paralyzed because
right.
you don't know what you want to say. If I have, okay, well, I'll try this painting or I'll take this photo. And if it doesn't work, whatever, I have six others that like do go with the theme. And
Hmm.
once you get going, then it's like, well, I'll just keep making and I'll see if something better comes out. And you just having that, like getting that ball rolling is one of the hardest parts. I feel like,
Hmm.
Nicole, I'm not sure where you're at, but you had just had a big show. I feel like personally, I'm in a like a, okay, what's the next thing about? Like, I don't know what the next thing's about. And I'm feeling very like, I don't know, like I'm still having that blank canvas effect because I'm taking photos and I still don't fully understand what's going on with them. And it makes taking more photos hard. But once I figure out that like that hook, that theme, that through line, I'll be like, great. And I'll just like go berserk.
Yeah, one of my mentors, they call it the show hole. You fall into a hole after your show, and it just takes a long time to kind of crawl your way out of it because you've had all of your ideas kind of pointing in one direction within these constraints for so long, and then those constraints are immediately removed. You can create anything you want again. And on top of that, just the sheer amount of effort to create a body of work. I This came up in a guild meeting a few weeks ago or a few months ago,
Hmm.
and about because I haven't painted much the last year because it's been a year since my show. It's just been really hard for me to kind of figure out what I'm doing and find the time and feel like it's worth kind of getting going again. And I remember Amy Lee just looked at me and said, Nicole, you just had a baby. Like, give yourself a
Hmm.
break. Like, this idea of like, you just birthed this big thing, like, take a
Yeah.
rest. Like,
Yep.
I think this kind of lie of hyper productivity that we have to be machines and just crank out pieces, just one after the other for the rest of our lives. Like, it's paralyzing and also not how people work, oftentimes, unless you're one of the rare few. But
Yeah.
most of us can't do that.
No. Yeah. It's like you're always trying to balance the tension of you need the constraint, but you need the freedom and you need to get the ball rolling, but you also need to like take a breath. And that reminds me, I want to go back earlier. Isaac, you were talking about, you didn't know if it made sense putting the space, having enough space so the paintings have room to breathe. I think that's vital. And I think the same is true even actually as a writer. That's a thing even on the page. There are some pages that you realize, whoa, I need to do a chapter break, or I need to do more dialogue here, because the white space, our brains need the white space in order to absorb what we're looking at or the story we're hearing. I mean, you think about rests in music. That's not an absence of sound. It's intentional, So that was interesting to me. I'm never going to go to a gallery show the same again now.
It's our intention.
Yeah. Are there any other thoughts? Yeah, go.
I was just so you know, like, yes, there is a lot of intention. There is sometimes just you have to work with the space you're given. Like, there is just sometimes where it's like, this photo is not gonna fit on this wall, so it's going on that wall.
Oh, that's frustrating. Yeah, that's
it's
true.
just
You
like,
guys have,
that's how it's gotta be.
That's interesting. Because with like an album, as I was talking about an album, especially in the digital age that we have, Noah Kahn can have 30 songs or whatever, or 7. It doesn't matter. But when they were pressing LPs, you're limited. Yeah. So I want to know if you guys, I should have prepared you beforehand, but I didn't. I was just wondering if you have like a favorite anecdote from a gallery show. It can be funny. It can be cringy. It can be inspiring. Like something you overheard and like made you laugh, or I don't know. I should have asked ahead of time.
Okay, the first thing that comes to mind, this is like cringy and uncomfortable and like kind of
Perfect.
like PG, but
okay,
that piece you mentioned or in the introduction, Pieta. So that one, I am the model in that piece, and it's kind of like I'm on this couch and there's all this stuff going on in the piece. Well,
little rabbits and all kinds of things.
I had this stranger, no one I knew, come to my show and proceed to be like, "Is that you?" and keep going and be like, "Because you have really good legs." And he turned my painting into like great legs. And I was like, God, I need to go to the bathroom. Get me out of here.
Yeah.
That was the first story that comes to mind. So perils of putting yourself in paintings. People will comment on you.
Your legs.
So,
yeah. Oh, and that's so reductive too.
I know. It's like, you don't
You're
get
like,
anything.
okay, the next person will get it.
Yeah.
What about you, Isaac? Nobody's commented on your legs because you're only in one.
No, because it's just waist up. So that's all.
Dang.
You can't see my
nice
legs.
Beard, though.
Yeah. I can't really think of a single anecdote. There was a lot of my show that just felt like it's up. Like that's like the biggest memory that I have of the show is just the relief of it being kind of up and out, and like it's done.
Yeah.
It's up. It's out in the world.
So you didn't have fear? Did you guys have fear, or were you just like, yay, ha?
By the time I got to that point, I feel like all my fear is about creating. Do I have ideas? Can I execute them? Whereas once I get there, I feel pretty confident in my work, which is a gift, because I know
really
that might not be the case for everybody, but I really just love sharing it. I'm proud of it. Like, it's really positive at that point.
Good.
All of the existential dread is earlier in the process.
Yeah, I had a friend, mutual friend of the podcast, Evangeline, when her first book was published several years ago, she said, and I think she stole this from another friend of ours, but I can't remember. She said that the way you feel the morning that you know your book is out, you feel like somebody tied you to a lamppost naked, because it's out there and I can't do anything about it. And so you said something at that guild meeting, Nicole, about how if 99% of the people don't get it, that's okay with you. And I'm like, I think I leaned over to you and I'm like, can you teach me? Because I don't know. Yeah. Do you feel the fear, Isaac, or do you resonate with what Nicole just said?
I resonate a lot with what Nicole said. My experience is also different because the biggest show I did was the thesis show on campus. And so the majority of the people who were there were professors and people from the community, like in California, who would come to support other like people in my cohort. So all of the fear of like, an art critic coming in, like the professors had all, like they're the biggest critics of the work, but they had seen it for 3 years. I knew their thoughts. I knew, like, I was like, kind of walking through being like, Marcus is going to love it. Mary's going to say this about it. Like I knew what they were going to say. And so a lot of that fear was kind of gone because I knew I knew what they would say. And so it was kind of a good surprise when someone who I thought was like, they're not going to get it, they're not going to like it, would come in and say like, oh, this was really successful. I like this part of it. I think that's one of the things that I enjoyed the most was there's so many little details in a show, whether it's the framing or how,
Mm.
for a photographer, how big you print at,
Mm-hmm.
all these like little choices that most people don't think about. And so to make a lot of those choices and have a professor come in and say, I like this choice, this like little thing I noticed, I liked it. It was like, okay, cool, like great. It was worth it. Like, because yeah,
You
there's a
told your
there's a,
story.
so many little things that can make or break it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with Isaac that like with my show, for example, it was people I loved, it was friends, it was people who'd been supporting me. So maybe that's part of it. Like the
Mm-hmm.
day I have a show in the Tate and I'm going to get like skewered in the newspaper, then maybe I'll be more freaked out about it. But that's
Yeah.
just not, I mean, I'm kind of small fish right now. So that's just not the people coming. So,
Well, we'll come.
But I think like when it's small fish, I do enjoy because you get to make all those choices. Like sometimes in like the
That's a
Tate,
good
you're going to
point.
give over your work and they're going to, put the work and it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be beautiful.
Yeah.
But like one thing that took forever is lighting the show, like
Mhm.
putting up the lights and figuring out how to get it to hit the piece right and not reflect off the glass in the way you don't want it to. And
Mm-hmm.
this little thing. And it's one of those things that you hope that literally nobody notices.
Mm-hmm.
The professor that taught the class that like showed me how to light it, walked in and said, you did a good job lighting the show. And like, that's like the yes, great.
Yeah.
But if it's one of those things that if you walk in and someone notices the lighting, you've already like, oh no, that's not good.
I
You
have
don't want that.
noticed, yeah, I've noticed lighting before and I know that you're not supposed
Yeah, you don't
to.
want
And it
that.
was, yeah, no. And it was like at a museum and I was like, oh, yeah, that's really cool. Well, thank you guys so much for spending time with me. This has been really cool, even better than I expected. And I had high expectations because I know you both. I think we are winding down. We are winding down here at the Anselm Society Digital Club. The fire is down to embers. The customers are trundling home and you have polished off your final glass. Once again, Believe to See is a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. And if you have a minute, we would love for you to rate and review the show on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts, or on YouTube, since we're there now too. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.